Now it's time for our last keynote of the day. I hope they're here. I'd like to welcome Alan and John to the stage. Woo! Yeah. To talk about the next wave of privacy products. After this, we'll have some short remarks from Eleanor, the founder of ETHDam, and then you will be able to enjoy some alcoholic beverages, I believe. So, woo for that.
Might need one on stage. Can someone grab me one?
Yeah. What are you looking for? Maybe we can get it delivered.
I can wait.
All right. Yeah, you can use the one that's on there, or you can use that one.
Check 1, 2. Hey.
Super. All right.
Side stage people, just hold this down. Just talk. Okay. Sick. Thanks, Eleanor. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for having us, and big shout out to the people who are running ETHDam. This has been really fun so far, and also thanks to all the hackers who've been asking us all these really great questions about what we're building. It's been really, really fun. But we're going to be talking about the next wave of privacy products. I, of course, am Alan, one of the co-founders.
My name is John.
And yeah, we're working on a protocol called RAILGUN, which is effectively a suite of smart contracts that live all on chain. It acts like a private wallet, and you can take and transact from this private wallet however you would like, whether it be sending tokens to people, speculating on NFTs, swapping, yield farming, flash loans, the list goes on. You can do a lot of really cool stuff.
Yeah, and we deployed it just about a year ago on Ethereum, Polygon, Binance Smart Chain, Arbitrum more recently, and they've seen collectively about 300 million in volume in the last year, our first year. So kicking it off, I come from the Web 2 space where there's a host of data privacy issues, like as it even stands today. We think about vulnerabilities, how some of these things translate to Web 3. We have to think about vulnerabilities not only at the smart contract layer, but also the full stack, right? You could have privacy vulnerabilities on the client interfaces, the web and mobile apps that people use these products on. And it's things as simple as like when they're connecting to different RPCs, those RPCs can track IP addresses. So you have to proxy those through your own services to make them sort of VPN friendly. If they're pulling data from APIs, CoinGecko or other things for pricing, that's another privacy leakage issue, right? You're requesting data that can be associated with your address, certain tokens that only certain people have, et cetera.
Yeah, so in other words, like the big consideration that a lot of people have when it comes to smart contracts like are funds safe food, but when you're thinking about privacy, it's not just are funds safe, but are they private? And making sure that you're protecting against various vectors beyond just what's on chain that could dox people. And so yeah, like a lot of these challenges, definitely translate over to the Web3 space. I think one of the things that's really quite interesting is we talk about self-sovereignty in crypto a lot, but what's really ironic about the fact that we talk about self-sovereignty is that we actually don't have like control over who has access to our data. In other words, there's no limitation to this on a lot of the public ledgers that we transact on. We transact on it, it's recorded, and it lives there in perpetuity, and we have no ability to revoke or choose who gets to see this data.
Right. I mean, this problem was solved a long time ago, let's say, in the Web 2 space, where if you work for a large company, you have a certain role. Customer support sees different data than about customers than the admins versus business folks. And so access control in a smart contract system on a public ledger is somewhat non-existent. And this is where privacy solutions come in and can help to solve some of these issues.
Yeah, and I think too, one of the things above and beyond that, right, has to be the data availability issue and serving that to client-side solutions like Railgun, because there isn't any sort of like back-end services with Railgun. There's not like a Railgun server or something like this you're tapping into when you use the project. It's all just client-side logic, so what you're doing on your phone or laptop is wholly included there. And so getting data to those particular clients is definitely a challenge in itself.
Yeah, I mean, this is something we've focused on over the last 6 months, really honed in on. Data availability in a privacy system is a little bit different than kind of data availability when you can just look up a balance of a certain address. You actually have to build a full like Merkle tree client side. If you're storing balances, accumulating them through like a Merkle tree data structure, you need to basically pull in, download a whole bunch of data, decrypt it all client side, and this is happening on a mobile phone for the most part. So it's really kind of a challenge to make it optimized and friendly for usage.
Yeah, and I think too, just above and beyond that, right? Getting access to this data is certainly a challenge in its own right. But one of the biggest problems that we face when we're developing these sort of things is the on-chain costs associated with it, right? So we work really hard to make sure that there's no like extra validators or something like this when it comes to Railgun, so you don't have any like off-chain sequencers or something like this. You don't have to worry about there being a vector of control in that regard. But what comes it comes at a cost, right? And it's computational cost and the storage costs associated with zero knowledge. This moon math is really magical, and it allows us to do some really cool private stuff, but it's certainly computationally intensive. In fact, one side of a Railgun transaction can be in excess of 1 million gas, and so this is certainly a challenge that we've been working on and have made some pretty exciting progress on it, in fact.
Yeah, no doubt. So when I talked about the last 6 months being about data availability in terms of the infrastructure layer, the next 6 months is going to be about cost savings, bringing this more in line with a public transfer. Right now, as Alan mentioned, 1 million gas for a private transfer on Railgun. That is as opposed to about 160 to 200,000 for it's many times what a public transfer would be, less than 100,000 gas. And so we actually have a model, a new cryptographic model, what's called KZG commitments, something being worked on in the cryptographic community pretty heavily. And this will bring the Railgun transactions down by 5x, we think. It'll bring it down from 1 million to 200,000 gas to do a private transfer, which obviously makes it much more accessible for everyday users.
Yeah, KZG is really exciting because it's not only like computationally less intensive, but it's also a lot cheaper to store, so it's a double whammy savings. So we're really excited about that. I don't think this is the talk for that. We could certainly get in the weeds of it over some beers outside after this, but so if you want to talk more about that, come find us. And I think one of the last things that I think is really quite important when it comes to decentralized apps, right, is the decentralization part of it, right? And so this is something that we focus on pretty heavily when it comes to Railgun.
Yeah, I mean, the on-chain governance system for Railgun is pretty exciting. In some ways, it's the first of its kind, complete custom governance system. For example, we have governance on Ethereum that actually controls the smart contracts that are launched on Arbitrum. And so Rail holders are governors on Ethereum. They hold and they vote with that token, and they can put up proposals. The Arbitrum system of governance actually watches for changes on Ethereum and automatically updates the Arbitrum system when it sees Ethereum changing. And this had never been deployed before. We have some really awesome smart contract engineers working on these hard problems.
Yeah, in other words, there's no like trust me bro statements, like a multi-sig controlling part of it or something like this, right? And I think that that's something that's certainly a challenge also, sequencers and things like this. And so these are certain things to be thinking about when you're building privacy protocols, especially because centralized control can lead to pressure from people who want to apply it, right?
And that brings to one of the probably the biggest topics of the day, talking about regulatory concerns when it comes to building privacy products.
Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest challenges, and I think the last panel was actually really quite illuminating to hear from these folks. Some of the things that we've thought about, of course, naturally, like a lot of privacy solutions out there, are view keys. And so this allows you to take and have that view access that we're just talking about. I think it was on the first slide, wasn't it? And I think this is really cool because you can take and choose, right? You have self-sovereignty over your data, right, which is really interesting. And I think this is a very, very important thing, right? So you can choose who has that kind of stuff or access to see, right? And we do this in a really cool way, right?
Yeah, viewing keys are sort of a separate key pair from, you think of public-private key for your public wallet. For your private Railgun wallet, and many privacy protocols have a similar structure, you have a spending key pair and you have a viewing key pair. You keep the spending key pair close to home. Don't share that with anybody because they'll have access to spend your crypto.
Yeah, not your keys, not your crypto, right?
The view keys are read-only access, so you could give this to an accountant, or you could give it to an auditor or a business manager or whatever to share your transaction history in total, sort of in perpetuity, which we'll get into, because there are some problems with that structure, but it is a way to have compliance in these encrypted systems.
Yeah, and so one of the tricks you just got into, which is really true, is that this view key is irrevocable, right? So once you've given access to people to view these, you can't just take it back, right? Because they have access to this viewing key, right? And we're working on some things that are really interesting. We'll talk about that in just a second. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting too that we've worked on is the ability to take and have like tax compliance features within a private wallet infrastructure. So I can actually export my transactions. Anybody here use Coinly other than me? Yes, nice. At least one person here, right? So I can take and export my transactions, upload that to Coinly, and do my taxes with the tools that I'm used to. And I think this is really nice because it's something that's really familiar to people. Especially in the US, it's really big. I've learned very recently that the taxes here are a lot more favorable for crypto, so maybe I'll migrate over here. But suffice it to say, it's a really cool feature. But there's also something that I really thought was really interesting that we're working on with some folks out of Turkey. They're called Chainway. They've invented this thing called proof of innocence. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so actually they had developed the first proof of innocence system for Tornado Cash that launched a few months ago, I think. To a bunch of news articles and pretty good acclaim from the community. We have given them a pretty sizable grant to work on a recursive proof of innocence that'll work on top of Railgun private balances, it's a little more intense kind of ins and outs within the system because of peer-to-peer transfers that can happen privately inside of the system. And so they're working on that. We expect to see a kind of demo-ready version in the next couple months, and this fall to have a production version that's available for people to use.
And so this is actually really exciting to someone like me because you don't have to give people view keys. And we can also move away from like intermediaries that control like KYC and gatekeep the protocols and adjudicate who is and who isn't a bad actor. But rather we can rely on moon math to prove our do-goodery, or maybe we're just a regular old degen like the rest of the people gambling on shitcoins on Ethereum or something like this, right? And so we can actually take and make arbitrary statements and have them be privacy preserving about our balances. And this is something that's really exciting. And something these guys earlier alluded to at the previous panel. We can get involved and present these things to people who are regulators. And so I'm actually going to take our proof of concept, go to DC in the US where I'm from, and show this to folks. I have a meeting set up with like the AML folks at FinCEN, if you're familiar with that regulator. Been door knocking at the Office of Foreign Asset Control. Pretty excited to see if we can't show this to people and get people comfortable with this, because I think this is really quite important. KYC and current AML rules, in my opinion, are really quite difficult to deal with in a peer-to-peer ecosystem. And so if we could actually take and leverage the immutability, the immutable nature of crypto and the really cool, awesome moon maths that is zero knowledge, and have them make a baby that is a new compliance regime that's not based on intermediaries, but mathematics instead, I'd argue that this is pretty powerful.
So when we're looking to the future, near term, longer term, we look at unlocking kind of the potential of these products in a few different ways. I think one of the biggest challenges right now is that for people in this room, privacy is a grave concern. Obviously, that's why we're united here. But for the everyday user, they might not think about these things as much, right? So education events like this are a huge component of that, educating the public, but also creating systems and applications that kind of bring privacy to them where they're already doing business, in the apps that they're already using on a daily basis that they're familiar with, in a context that is easy to use, that's not posing a challenge, that's not much more expensive. These are all very difficult problems on their own to solve, and collectively, obviously, it's a can of worms, and it will be a challenge. But I think this is the way we kind of bridge that gap and bring privacy to everyday people that don't necessarily think about it as much as we do.
Yeah, 100%. I would say to that we can, if we want to think about the future, we can look at the past, right? And I don't think that history repeats itself, but I do think it frequently rhymes, right? And so if we reflect back to the advent of the internet, right, SSL encryption actually wasn't a thing. It took until what, 95? And Netscape did it.
Yep.
And online commerce wouldn't happen without it. Just a quick show of hands, who would put their credit card information in on a non-secure website? All right, no hands. We have a well-educated room in here, right? And so this sort of thing, right, allows us, right, privacy allowed like this Cambrian explosion of a really new and interesting way to interact with each other in terms of commerce. And I think that the same thing is going to happen in the Web3 environment. And I would argue that privacy is going to become the norm going forward.
Yeah, and so one other thing is that we are not only concerned with end users and kind of the way they think about products and about privacy in general, but it's also influencing developers to include privacy more into the apps that they build and making it easier to do that. Because right now it is a significant challenge to build privacy into a dApp, for example. And so we actually last week released a new product we call the Railgun Cookbook. And it is a selection of recipes. We tried to break it down into like bite-sized pieces for people in order to make what is kind of a hairy, complex topic and make it a little more approachable and give people the tools to build privacy-ready dApps, with the Railgun encryption system kind of underlying them.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess if we think about the future, we got some near-term exciting stuff that people are hopefully hacking on diligently downstairs that I'm excited to see, which I think is going to be really cool, man. And so, yeah, our argument is that privacy is going to become the default. And we hope that people who are building these sort of applications in the decentralized land of finance integrate this kind of thing. I think Cookbook is a really great way to do it. It certainly makes it a lot less challenging. The people writing the code on Railgun, the contributors participating in this decentralized ecosystem have smashed their heads against keyboards for many hours for almost 2.5 years to make this, and hopefully this helps lower that barrier for entry for people to take and add this to the things that they're doing in the ecosystem, whether it's payroll or private sealed bid auctions and things like this.
Yeah, so thanks for listening, guys. We'll be roaming around, so come say hi and ask us any questions you got.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, guys.